Thank you, Mark, for joining us today on this podcast. It is a great honor to have you with us. And I would like to start by asking you well, you have been an advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals and the author of the UN Sustainable Development Goals Manifesto. Do you believe that sustainable development is truly achievable?
Thank you, Sarah. So nice to be here, and I really appreciate it. What a great question. So, the Sustainable Development Goals are absolutely achievable. It seems now that we only have 5 years left to go till they're done, till the Paris Agreement is over at December 31st, 2030, that it's unreachable target because we really haven't gotten the ball rolling, haven't gotten started. But I think the problem is because a lot of people don't understand what sustainable development goals are, who they're for, how to look at them or how to understand them, and that's really why I wrote the Sustainable Development Goal Manifesto. The manifesto is a vision of how we can manifest the goals and what it would look and feel like if we achieve all the goals December 31st, 2030, what that world would look like if we reach and achieve all the goals. And the Sustainable Development Goals are really simple, and I'm going to explain them to you. So they're all a system. They're all tied together. You can't just work on one or two Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah, if you work on one, you work on them all because they're all tied together in a system. They're connected as a system, and they're all tied to the basic needs and resources of us, you and me, human beings. They're made for us. They're not made for countries, for corporations, for cities, for politicians. They're made for us. It's so that all human beings on Earth can have the basic rights, the basic infrastructure, food, water, clean sanitation, cities, sustainable cities and communities, quality education. All the sustainable development goals are the basic needs for each and every one of us, you and I. And I want to go just a little bit deeper so that people can understand it. Sarah, do you know what sustainable development is? What is it for you?
For me, I think it's different from sustainability. Sustainability for me is the end goal, a state in the future, balanced state, and sustainable development is a process or set of processes that will lead us to that state of sustainability.
Thank you for sharing that. And I get that a lot around the world where people are asked that question and they're kind of get this feeling like, whoa, what is it? It's real simple. Sustainable development is the same as development, but it's just one nudge or notch higher or step in the right direction. Development is the built environment. It's how we live. Development is infrastructure, roads, highways, residential, commercial buildings, schools, universities, hospital. That's development. It's the built environment and how we live. And so sustainable development is just one step in a little bit better future of how we live in the built environment. It means that we use circular economy, better materials, means we use cradle to cradle processes, means we use LEEDs, BREEAM, ISO standards, Green Building Council, U.S. Green Building Council standards, and how we build that environment, and it's called sustainable development. And the goals are to build that future a little bit more sustainable. And it's not perfect. And matter of fact, we don't want to sustain the world that we live in because it's actually pretty outdated. It's not keeping pace with the world as the way the world's working. We want to build a sustainable development foundation, a firm foundation of how we live with better materials, cleaner air, more sanitation, more renewable energy, circular economy principles, and things like that, so that we can then springboard off into much better and brighter futures. Um, I want to go even deeper. So development, just regular development, is what we call the high carbon scenario. That means we built it like we've always built the infrastructure of our world since the Industrial Revolution. And we use lots of materials, lots of fossil fuels, lots of chemicals, high waste, and we're not too concerned about money or about the health of human beings and how they live. And and then when the building, the infrastructures or that get used or dilapidated or get old, we just tear them down and we rebuild them like business as usual. And that's an economy, just regular development. That's an economy. It's one of the world's largest economies. And in that 15-year period of the Sustainable Development Goals of the Paris Agreement from December 2015, 2015 to December 31st to 2030, that's a 89 trillion US dollar economy. Now, so when we talk about sustainable development, we've already kind of defined what it is and who it's for. That is also an economy, but it's a little bit different. It's an ecological economy. It's what we call the low carbon scenario because we use better materials, better practices, more LEEDs, BREEAM, renewable energies, ISO standards to build that environment and build a firm foundation. And we do it for everywhere on the world. So not just developing countries, but everywhere that might not have clean water or sanitation or renewable energy and those things. So that those places around the world can come up to speed in how they live more sustainably, more efficient. And that is an ecological economy because it's concerned about human health and about our ecology, but it's a 94 trillion US dollar economy, which is only about 5 trillion more than just regular development with a much better outcome. It means more prosperity, more better health, better infrastructure, better roads, highways, better schools, universities, and all those things that many people are missing out in around the world to bring that standard up for everybody in the world to have the basic needs to live a sustainable life. Now that's not perfect, and I hope that helps you understand that's what sustainable development is, and the goals are the goals to achieve that development. So I just got done telling you it's about 94 trillion US dollars to do it a lot better with a lot better outcomes. And people say, wow, I know what million is, but a trillion, I have no idea how much a trillion is. That's an astronomical number. But I want you to know there's enough money out there already. In COP26, COP is the Conference of the Parties from the United Nations. They have them every year around the world. And at COP26 in Glasgow in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, Glasgow, Scotland, in the United Kingdom, they had a COP. It's a 2-week conference of the United Nations on the climate. And on the first week of that 2-week conference on Thursday, Mark Carney and Rishi Sunak, who was at that time later became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, committed $130 trillion towards sustainable development goals, towards the heart of climate finance and sustainability. So there's more than enough money, more than the 94 trillion, more than the 89 trillion to build that sustainable future. And so we're not lacking in that money. And we can divvy it out between the countries and the money's accessible. The question is, or the big thing that we're seeing is not enough people understand what sustainable development is and how to unlock that money, not at a country level, not at a politician level, not at an individual or a business level. And what it means to just not come to the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank or the IMF or many of the other places where that money is at, and just say, "Hey, I'd like some of that Sustainable Development Goal money. Can you give me some?" The you know they want you to come with a project, and they want you to come with plans on how to make it sustainable development. And this is where many people struggle. They think, "Oh, well, I'm going to use solar panels, or I'm going to use wind energy, or I'm going to build with hemp or something. I'm going to build a project with hemp." And they pick out one facet to do, and then they kind of submit a half-hearted project or plan to get those monies. Well, that's not quite the standard in the way that we've done things in past. You have to have a complete project plan to really say, we're developing this sustainably, and it meets all the facets. Not only does it meet good building to be sustainable, but it also covers energy, it covers food, water, sanitation, and it's a complete thing that addresses all the sustainable development goals. And we do it in not some kind of funny way where we write up a feasibility study or do some PowerPoint presentation, but we actually get architectural, engineering plans, business plans on what we want to do and where it's at currently in that just regular development scenario, kind of a pre-appraisal. It's where is that location, that business, that plan of what you want to do at currently, and how are you going to improve upon it using the sustainable development goals, using the measurements of the Paris Agreement to move a little bit more sustainable. And then once you have that, you can then go and request those monies, because there's a lot of not only investors, but people, especially with the European New Green Deal, they're trying to switch their stranded assets and their investments that are in fossil fuels and bad projects and chemical companies and those things, and real estate especially, into sustainable investments, or what we call environmental social governance investments. And they're looking for those type of projects. And currently there's been less than a trillion, 1.8 trillion US dollars that have been divvied out in sustainable development. So there's still, about 139 trillion US dollars available there for many countries to go to, yeah, to kind of build that new infrastructure. So I know that's kind of a long answer, but it's kind of a little bit more goes into that. Normally, when I tell people I wrote the Sustainable Development Goal Manifesto, they don't even know what the SDGs are. They haven't heard, and they don't have any idea. But then they also say, "Oh yeah," if they do know, they say, "Oh, I know about it. I like number one, red. It's my favorite color. It's no poverty." And I say, "Oh, that's fabulous." But I tell them it's virtually impossible to work on one SDG and not touch on all the others. If you were to take that example I just gave you and try to work on no poverty, you would all automatically touch on number two, zero hunger, quality education, clean water and sanitation, life on land, life below water, all the other ones, in order to achieve that. And so when people or companies in the past say, "Oh yeah, we're working on 3 SDGs for our company," I know that they're cherry picking the SDGs, and I know they're greenwashing, because it's virtually impossible. You would automatically work on all of them if you have that proper plan and thinking.
Yeah. That's why there is this notion of sustainability as a wicked problem, right? Also, there is like it is intertwined, all interconnected, everything. So if you try to cover one problem, you probably will uncover the others. So do you think that, well, it is not because of lack of investment, as you said, there is plenty of money out there. So is it because of the less mature projects we are presenting that we are falling short of meeting the 2030 agenda and Paris Agreement? Is it because we don't have the proper
Um,
project ideas?
no, No, I don't, but I would like to go even more into explain it a little bit more and kind of what the many problems are. One, the Paris Agreement, even the Sustainable Development Goals, they're so big, people don't really understand them. They haven't been explained properly. Some people think, let's just go to the word sustainability. They think it's to go vegetarian or to go vegan, or they think that if you're going to be sustainable, you should fly less. I mean, Greta Thunberg, so wonderful. I did a documentary film with her. It's called Now, and she's just wonderful. I mean, the whole point that she did the climate strike is she said, if we're learning all these things in school about climate change and about what needs to be done, and it's kind of scary to learn about all that. But then we look at our politicians and we look at our world, and everybody's just going out business as usual and doesn't really care. So why should I learn these things if nobody's acting upon them? Why if and nobody's implementing them or making the world better? Why should I learn about it? Because obviously it's not important to learn, or why should I go to school? And so that's the reason she did the climate strike. But my point was is she was big about not flying, right? And I want everybody to know sustainability is not about doing less harm, and it's not about sustaining the world we're currently in, because I already don't feel like the world we're currently in is very bright and hopeful and very good. I think it's on there every day. It's like a walk through the book of Revelations. It's like this disaster, this fire, California, this war, this hurricane, this tornado, and it's not slowing down, it's getting faster, it's speeding up, more stuff is happening. So, and we're also not slowing down. So to be sustainable, people think, oh, if I want to do sustainability, I just got to stand in place. I can't fly anymore, I can't eat meat anymore, I can't do this anymore. And they think, wow, I would like to do some of these things. I didn't get to do them before, or now all of a sudden I'm hearing that I need to reduce and reduction my lifestyle. I have to do less harm. And that's not what sustainability is about, but it's about moving into a direction that we leave our planet better than we found it, and we kind of make an evolution out of the way we currently live into a much better way of living. And that one, I want to let everybody know, is absolutely not about reductionism and less consume in the way we currently know it, but in a much different way. And let me explain that. So I'm a futurist with the United Nations, also an advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals that you see on my chest here. In 2019, with the United Nations and all 200 country delegations and the UNFCCC and the Secretariat of the United Nations, we had a 7-day workshop in Songdo, Korea at the adaptation and mitigation event called the NAP Expo, the National Adaptation Program Expo in Songdo, Korea, where we gathered for 7 days and did a moonshot workshop to specifically focus in and think about what are the goals that are going to come after the Sustainable Development Goals. What's the program? What's the idea? Where do we want to go from 2030 to 2050? And we came up with this, and it was under this program through the UNFCCC Adaptation and Mitigation Office with all these wonderful people, country delegates, and the United Nations Secretariat. Ban Ki-moon was there, and Patricia Espinosa, and Antonio Guterres, and the queen of the COP21, and now I'm forgetting her name, Figueres is her last name. Figueres is her last name. Yeah, yeah. She also has a podcast, but we did this moonshot workshop to come up with goals, and it's under a program called Resilience Frontiers. And what it's come out to be is the Resilient Development Goals. Now, when I started the program and Future IO Institute and Future Literacy Labs and UNESCO and the UN and all the futurists that were kind of helping to do the foresight materials and think about that. They were very much in this adaptation, resilience, mitigation type of modus. I wanted to do regenerative and move towards regeneration and symbiosis. And matter of fact, at that event, there was a professor that talked about homo symbiosis and symbiosis and a process that's evolutionary innovation process and the way the world has always worked. And it's a really good model to move forward. But somehow all of those people that gathered couldn't get beyond this resilience, that we need resilience in our systems to kind of help the shocks. So from 2030 to 2050, it'll be the resilient development goals. Having said that, people are complaining, will we reach the goals? Will we do it? Can we achieve them? They haven't even begun. They don't know how to understand them. So it doesn't look very good, but it makes sense that before the Sustainable Development Goals were also goals called the Millennium Development Goals. And after the Sustainable Development Goals, there will be other goals. So instead of debating and wasting all that time, is to be future fit, because our world is evolving in an exponential manner every single day. As I mentioned, there's things going on all the time and craziness around the world. And in a world that's evolving in an exponential manner and is exponentially evolving every single day, if we only improve incrementally, if we only take baby steps, or we still are working on things clear in the Industrial Revolution or in the past, we will fall behind exponentially. That means we will be exponentially behind, which means suffering, climate problems, lots of disasters, because we're not keeping pace with that evolution or development of how our world is naturally evolving. And having said all that, this year there will be a book release by a large group of people, about 250 researchers and scientists, myself, Chad Frischman, Amanda Joy Ravenhill, called the Regenerative Development Goals. And it's a book about that, and it'll be presented to the UN General Assembly so that we can hopefully leapfrog from resilient development goals straight into the regenerative development goals, because it's a much better way for our world to function, and it's really where we want to go into the future. The reason that's important, if you have regeneration, you automatically have resilience and sustainability. But if you have just sustainability, let's say you're the most sustainable city in the world and things are going fabulous, like Bhutan is pretty sustainable. It's a net positive. And in one day, a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, a climate change, a war or something, that can wipe out all your sustainability within minutes and within an hour, and it's all gone. And so that's why resilience comes in. If you have a little bit of resilience for those natural disasters, energy needs, water, climate change, then you can bounce back because you have a little bit of sustainability, and you can bring back those resources that are needed because of resilient infrastructures. But if you have regeneration and you're every day, every second regenerating the earth, restoring, rejuvenating, regenerating it, you not only have resilience, but you have sustainability, and it's one that's always keeping pace with the way the world grows and evolves. And so that's really where we want to go. And the definition, just so if anybody wants to know, the definition of regeneration means to create the conditions that are conducive to life to thrive and flourish amid ever-changing life conditions. And not only does it sound beautiful, but it's really a formula for success. No matter how bad it gets in the future, you're always restoring, regenerating, repurposing, leaving the world better than you found it. And that's not just, people hear me talk about regeneration or regenerative. They're like, oh, Mark's talking about regenerative agriculture. Yeah, I talk a lot about that, but I'm not. I'm talking about regenerative economies, regenerative health, regenerative communities, regenerative business models, regenerative development, and regenerative agriculture. And there's many more regenerative models. I mentioned the numbers and the figures for regular development and for sustainable development. Let me tell you the numbers for regenerative development. There is $280 trillion today ready for the taking in regenerative development. That's about $11.2 trillion every year available just for regenerative development to build that regenerative future. And it's a lot different than the sustainable development. It's also an ecological economic model, but it has to do with the principles of higher certification standards, higher conditions in the built environment, that we build and do things that don't harm human beings, society, our infrastructure, or the environment, that clean the air, that give us plenty of energy, that provide plenty of food. And it's the best insurance plan ever. Let's take California and the fires of devastation that we saw there. If they had regenerative developments where all those areas that were burned, they would have plenty of water and humus in the soils. They would have plenty of clean oxygen, plenty of trees. They would still have all the homes, but they wouldn't be these golf course type of luxury homes. They would have these homes that had really regenerative landscaping, that were growing food and creating oxygen and capturing carbon. And there would be a lot of moisture in the soil so that when those fires came, they wouldn't ignite and spark and burn so fast. And they would also always be regenerating that topsoil and that deep humus in the ground. Right now in California and across the world, people are realizing that to buy insurance for how we live, we get an insurance policy for fire and flood. That's like gambling. That's like a bad investment against risk. If it happens, if you lose a life, if you lose your home, if you lose all your pictures and all your memories, or the place you grew up, or the place you've lived with your family, that then you have an insurance policy that can rebuild it up. But if you lose life and those memories, you can't ever replace those with money. The best insurance plan is regenerative development, that we always leave our earth better than we found it. And it's an abundant model. It's the best hedge against any bets, because it's an appreciative model. You leave the earth and the places where you live much better than you found them. So that, I mean, I know, sorry, that's kind of long, but that kind of ties the journey that we want to go in and explains all that.
So regenerative development is the way forward. But how can, so if we invest in regeneration, we will be investing or becoming more resilient, right? And how can this address the problem of different levels of development? Because the most vulnerable countries, the developing nations, need more resilience. How can we address that?
So by having regeneration, regenerative economies, regenerative development, regenerative agriculture, regenerative communities, health, medicine, and those things in those developing countries, when you have regeneration, you automatically have that resilience, because the resilience comes by having so much clean air, so much deep topsoil and humus in your soils that are actually capturing the carbon and keeping moisture in the ground. They're not creating dry zones. They're creating abundance of food and living health in the earth around us. That's a way how we live and build, but it's also creating those opportunities for us to have regenerative agriculture, regenerative businesses, and the way we do things. And by having that, they're actually creating that resilience. It's a byproduct of being regenerative. You automatically, so like all of a sudden, let's say you've got this big regenerative development place where it's just beautiful and wonderful and green and thriving, but there's also people living there. It's not like we're going back to live in tree houses or in the caves. We're actually still living good. It's just, it's a slightly different, but it's not more backwards. It's actually more advanced way of living. And what happens is, let's say there was a lightning strike that sparked a fire or a tornado or hurricane, because there's more moisture in the air, because there's more moisture in the ground, more topsoil, the trees aren't dry. Have you ever tried to burn a green tree, one that's full of water? It's pretty hard. If you were to cut down a green tree and cut it up into firewood and then immediately try to put it on a fire, it'll smoke a lot because there's a lot of moisture in that tree. And it's also hard to get it started without a lot of kindling and high heat and maybe even some kind of a fuel to get it going, because it's full of water, it's full of all that life. And the ground around it is full of this deep humus and topsoil that has this mycelium web and this wood wide web underneath it that is full of moisture and all these things, so that it's really hard to start a fire on that. It's also like, even if we don't go towards the fire direction or desertification, if we go in the other direction, let's say you have a supercell storm. A supercell storm is a phenomenon that's been happening more and more, probably the last with more frequency in the last 10 to 12 years, a lot. What it means is that for thousands of miles, there will be these big clouds full of moisture and rain. And it's like a bathtub, these, 1,000 kilometers, 1,000 miles of these cumulus clouds, supercells will gather. But then when they rain or when the water comes out of these river clouds, they only come out in one little spot. It's kind of like a bathtub. You pull the plug on a bathtub and it doesn't go out everywhere in the bathtub. It just goes out in the drain. And so these supercell clouds are kind of like that. So they'll have all this, um, hundreds of millions of liters or gallons of water. And then all of a sudden it'll just come down in one area in this flash flooding type of a system, like you're draining a bathtub. And it'll hit areas in our world. We've had it anywhere in Texas and Arizona. We've had it all over the world. And mainly in dry areas, sadly, that's where it happens. And there's no humus, there's no moisture, there's no topsoil, there's no roots in the ground, there's no trees. And what happens is, and we've had it in Germany, you're calling me in Germany, I live in Hamburg, Germany, and we had it a couple of years ago in Germany, where it totally killed about 280 people, and it wiped out, a couple thousands of homes, where it came down like that and it just washed out everything because there was nothing to hold the ground together. So it just came down and it created these massive floods. And it's happened in Switzerland, it's happened in Africa, it's happened in the US, happens all over the world like that, because our ground is just sand. It's kind of like the three pigs story. How do we build our house? Are we building it with hay or straw and sticks or bricks? And it's kind of, how are we building our soil? How are we building where we live? Are we doing it in the proper way? And so that really gives you that resilience. And let's go to, because everybody always speaks about, show me the money, Mark, or show me the proof on this kind of stuff. Not only are there tons of reports out there, but in a business, a regenerative business model is not one of depreciation over time. It's one of abundance. You're always leaving the earth better than you found it, but you're also leaving your business better than you found it. So you're paying all your workers a fair wage. Everybody is doing well. The resources are covered, so you're not sacrifice. You're not like producing products with resources in a developing country. You're actually doing so everybody across the supply chain is being paid a fair wage. But it's an abundant model where everybody, because of what you're producing, because the type of business you do, You're always in the positive. You always got positive cash flow, and it's just a better business model, period, of how it works, because it's an abundant one. Instead of over time, it's always depreciating, or you're always looking for money, and that. So, and the biggest example of that is in regenerative agriculture. Of course, people say, you know, conventional or regenerative agriculture, we've proven over 5 years ago now that regenerative agriculture is a much better model than conventional agriculture. It can compete at industrial scales and at scale to feed people, but it's also in the process healing our health, it's healing our soils, it's healing our farms. It's not putting chemicals and pesticides and all sorts of other things back into the system that hurt the earth, but it's building up that resilience through regeneration to give us more ground to farm on, to give us more topsoil, to give us more food and those things, so that we have a better model. And those are the things that I talk about a lot. Try to give people the tools to understand it a little bit better.
Great information you've just shared. But why aren't people investing more in regenerative projects? And
Well, they actually are. Like I said, there's $280 trillion out there, and there's tons of investments out there. More than 1,000 that I know of, and more coming every single day. The problem is there's a lot of education that's needed out there for people to kind of find out about it. And not everybody's a farmer. And honestly, not everybody wants to be a farmer. Not everybody wants to be an infrastructure builder. They don't want to build houses and commercial businesses, and they don't want to build infrastructure and roads and highways. They're actually looking for their cities and their states and their countries and their politicians who are called as urban planners or people stewards over cities to do that for them. And that's where we all have a big choice. So I've done the social experiment for 9 years now. It's called What Does a World That Works for Everyone Look Like for You? And I won't put you on the spot unless you would like to answer it. If you want to answer that question, what does a world that works for everyone look like for you? I've asked 3,800 plus people that question on video, and they've given me their answer. And out of all 3,800, less than 7 have had a similar answer that was close to the correct answer. I think only one person had 100% correct answer. But oh, absolutely. It's a 70-plus-year-old question that we've been asking in international circles and organizations all around the world. And most people start to stutter. They start to sweat. Their eyes start to roll back in their head, and they're like, come back to me later, ask me later. I need to think about it. And the reason I did it on video is because a lot of people would come back a couple hours or a couple days or weeks or months later and say, hey, I thought about it. Can I give you the answer again? And I always wanted to compare the first answer to the new answer. And some people even came back, 5, 6 times. And every time their answer was different. Now, it's okay if you don't know the answer to that question, what does a world that works for everyone look like for you? But if you don't know the answer, I can promise you that someone in your life, a mayor, a senator, a president, a governor, religious leader, your parents, your grandparents, your husband, your wife, somebody in your life, if you don't know that answer, has jumped into that position in your life, and they say, oh, don't worry, I'm going to guide you on the future that I think works for everybody. And they're taking you along. It's mainly politicians who do that. We think we elect them so that they can do that. So if you know, and it's a great power to know the answer to that question, because if you know it and the people in your life that you think are guiding you or helping you are not taking you in that direction, then you can do something about it. You could tell them, hey, you're taking me in a direction that I don't want to go and that I don't think is for everybody. And so you can divest your vote, your time, your money. You can make a change. You can move. You can try to create something that is better yourself. And so it gives you lots of power, and it also helps to raise the awareness to others who maybe might be guiding you to try to answer that question and see what their answer is to that question. There is a correct answer, and the answer is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without the ecological offense or disadvantage of anyone. That's the answer to that question. And you can go down into even more actionable, detailed things of that. And the reason I said it's 70 plus years old is because this polymath architect and designer, um, R. Buckminster Fuller, or Bucky as I call him, he wrote this book, and I'll even show it to you. So I always have a copy close to me. It's called The Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. And it's just a thin toilet read, as you can see, not very thick, maybe 80 pages max, 90 pages max. He wrote this book, and one, first of all, operating for manual for Spaceship Earth, and it's a toilet read. That's pretty amazing. I wish I had a operating manual for my grandkids or my kids, that'd be nice, but, or even for the Earth, and to have it be so easy to understand. But he built, this is a picture of him, matter of fact, this is him. But he was an architect and polymath, and he built electric cars, and he built the geodescent domes. And this book was written in 1968, I believe. And 1967, he'd already developed this geodescent dome. It's a geodescent figure that you can use in building. And he built these geodescent domes. And in Montreal, Canada, at the World's Fair in 1967, he built this huge geodescent dome. And in that geodescent dome that he had built at the World's Fair, what's a World's Fair? It's like a World's Expo. It's where people from all over the world come together to think and talk about the future, but also to see futuristic architecture, design, foods, all sorts of things about the future. That's what a World's Fair is. So they came to see his geodescent dome, which was really massive. It's still there in Montreal, Canada. And they played this thing that he played. It's called the World Game. And in this book, in the inside cover of the book up here, he wrote the answer to the question, that 70-year-old question that I already gave it to you, to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without the ecological offense or disadvantage of anyone. And they played that game with people from all over the world, and that's how they came up with that answer. And so that social experiment that I've done with 3,800 people on video, I thought originally, okay, I'm going to do this compilation video. I'm going to get 25, maybe 50, maybe 100 videos of people giving their 1-minute answer to that question. I do this compilation. We'll have this big aha moment, and we'll be all like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And everybody knows. And then I'll post it on social media, and everybody will go out and the world will be great. And we'll all know what to do and everything's perfect. Because I've realized that nobody knows about the Sustainable Development Goals, or very few, and nobody really understands regenerative development or regenerative agriculture. Not very many people understand resilience. Not many people know that development is the built environment and how we live. It's part of evolution of life. We didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. We didn't leave the caves because we didn't like living in caves. We had an evolutionary process that we find better ways to interact at pace with the way our world and the natural world and life is evolving. And so in this world that talks a lot about AI and quantum computing, it's really interesting because I thought, okay, I'm going to take this experiment one step further. And I went and asked ChatGPT. I was one of the early beta users, and I went and asked it, and that question, what does a world that works for everyone look like for you? And it immediately gave me the answer that I told you from our Buckminster's book. And it actually went a little bit further into more detail and how some actionable things that we can do to make that happen. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is super. And then I thought, well, can I get it even finer? Can I even go finer and get fine tuning and stuff? So I hit that regenerate button on ChatGPT on the bottom. It's green. It's kind of this regenerate, one of my favorite buttons, and also topics. And so I hit it, and it came back with the same answer. And I thought, oh, that's wrong. Something's wrong. The computer's broke. The internet's down. And so then I hit it again, and it was the same answer. I hit it 120 times, and the answer was always the same. I asked friends around the world who are also beta users and others in different countries and languages to ask, and it always came back the same within that time period. Then I asked ChatGPT, it says, why is the answer always the same? It says, well, we're a large learning language model. We're trained through books and knowledge from that is given us as training. And this is the training that we've received out of these books and these authorities who've already asked this question over 70 years ago. And this is the answer. And there's ways to go even finer. I mean, the answer is not different, but there's ways to go finer and get into actionable steps based on countries and places and locations that we can put that into practice through different languages and things. But the answer is pretty much the same everywhere you go. That's what it told me. And I was like, wow. And that was an aha moment for me. And the reason why is, how in the hell does ChatGPT know the answer, but 3,800 people not know the answer? Did we domesticate technology, or did it domesticate us? I thought, we train it with our knowledge. So apparently it got the message and the training, but 3,800, and it's a lot more than 38, have never gotten that education. They weren't taught it in schools. They didn't read the books. I mean, it's in that book. How many people have read that book? So those who have read it and remember it might know it, but it's a very small percentage. And the same thing with the Sustainable Development Goals, the same thing with regeneration. The things that are taught in school, in business school, and life, in regular education, they're not teaching us these things, but they're vital information, vital questions we should be asking ourselves, because not only do they give us power, but they give us that manifesto. And that's why I wrote the manifesto, so that we can achieve those things and progress and have that evolution. There's one more thing that kind of ties to this. For many years as a coach and as a speaker, and that I used to teach people, we need to have this work-life balance. Let's have this work-life balance. And I'm deeply sorry about that, because I was wrong, and even I misunderstood. There is no such thing as work-life balance. It is pure bullshit. There is only life. So if we think that we're one person at work and one person in life, if you look around the world today, we have more than 86% globally job dissatisfaction, people who don't have work-life balance, who aren't satisfied with their job. They just do it to get by and make ends meet. And a lot of job dissatisfaction. If you're one person at your work and another person in your life, you're probably bipolar, schizophrenic, on the verge of burnout. You're probably sick, you're tired, depressed, because you're going in two different directions and you constantly have this conflict. We're not in the business of business. We're in the business of life. We're on this true business of life, that everything is an evolution of how we live life on earth. And that evolution in the built environment at the UN and at the World Economic Forum and at the EU is what we call development. But it's really just an evolution, and it's really just very simple. How do we want to live life? as a father of four adult children and six grandchildren, throughout my time, I've always thought, how do I want to live life with my kids and my family? What kind of rooms do I want to have? Do they all have their own room? What schools do they go to? What kind of place do we live in? What kind of environment that I can do in? And for me, that's the built environment. I think a lot about, do I want to live on a farm? Do I want to live in a house? Do I want to live in a condo? Do I want to live in an apartment? Do I want to have rooms for my kids? And what kind of things so that I can have a healthy environment for them? That for me is evolution. And throughout the years, as my kids have grown and now have their own kids, I've always thought, what does that look like? And that's evolution. But in the world, it's called development. And I don't know anybody who hasn't talked to me, oh, I need to make more money, or I just moved, or I just bought this, or come over and have dinner with us, or come over and have a barbecue, or whatever, because they're proud of how they're living. They're proud of how they've decorated their home. And there's one more thing that ties to that. When I speak around the world, I show, I ask people a question, another question. I ask them to close their eyes for just a few seconds and imagine their home. And I don't ask them to do it a long time. And I want them to close their eyes and imagine their home. And when the vision of their home comes into their mind's eye with their eyes closed, then I ask them to open their eyes. I want them to think about maybe what it feels like, what it smells like, what it looks like, what emotions does it give into them. And when that kind of that good feeling or picture comes up, to open their eyes. And then when they open their eyes, I show an image of the earth, of planet Earth on the screen, and I say, how many people thought of this as their home? And guess what? Less than 0.0001% of the last year of 500 million people I spoke to said that they envisioned the Earth as their home. That's kind of a big problem. And I'm not saying it to say, oh, ha, ha, you're wrong, and all this. I understand why. I understand why people think about that, because they think about, oh, I live on a farm, I live in a condo, I live with my parents, I live with my grandparents. I just starting out, I'm going to school, live in a dormitory. They all think about different locations and how they decorate it. Some think about their pets, and some think about their plants. Some think about their favorite thing in their house, and how they decorate it. And that's okay to have those different thoughts or feelings, but we are all on the same planet. And that's why that bigger question, what does a world that works for everyone look like for us? And we can all decorate our homes and individual locations that make us feel comfortable for us and our families and for the way we want to live, but we can't do it at the harm of other human beings and of our environment, because in the end effect, we're hurting the future generations, how they will live on Earth. And so there's many things that I talk about when I try to teach people about sustainability, that it's not about reductionism. For example, if they leapfrog to that regenerative model, they would just say, boy, that's an abundant model. I can grow my own food, and growing my own food's like printing my own money. I always have enough and abundance, and there's lots of monies to access there if I meet these right rigors to qualify for it. And it's just such a wonderful, bright world to be in.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a future vision of a great world. And you mentioned, well, a lot of ideas. Want to get. Just was thinking, like you said, two things really important for me, which were education and cooperation. I think they are key. And as you mentioned, well, you also mentioned that part of people not referring to Earth as their home, and I see a lot of disconnection from nature, and we are actually not wired to think like in systems and the interconnectedness of things, and that's why we also live and only think about our homes here and there. And you also mentioned ChatGPT, and I wanted really to understand what is your opinion regarding technology in helping us achieve that regenerative development?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, absolutely it will. So we're the ones who train AI, and we're the ones who program and build the quantum computers. There was a big debate a few years ago, and I think this ties back to we're asking the wrong questions or we're not understanding what's behind the questions or the things we do. There was at Google a person named Blake Lamont, and he was working on an AI system called Lambda AI. And he had made a statement and had some controversy that he said AI had gone sentient and become a sentient being and kind of was self-aware, and that's what sentience means. Um, and regardless of whether he was true or right or wrong, there was a lot of disagreement, and he ended up leaving Google because of that disagreement in the defense of AI, in the defense of technology. Um, and he had a very cushy job, corner office, was well paid, had insurance and everything. He was willing to sacrifice his livelihood in the defense of artificial intelligence. And that brings up this weird question for me is, I want you to know that plants, mycelium, mycorrhiza, bees, birds, species, and many animals out there have been sentient for about 3.8 billion years. And we've never had the debate about a bumblebee. Oh, I'm worried about that bumblebee being sentient and it's going to get pissed off because I'm stealing its honey and I'm not planting enough flowers. It's going to come sting me on the butt because it's sentient. We never had that debate before, but of something that we've created like AI, we're having that debate. Is it going to take us over? Is it going to be evil? But I just want everybody to be aware that the natural world, plants, bees, mycelium, mycorrhiza, they have been sentient for 3.8 billion years at least. Our timelines are fairly off, and we've never had that debate or question. I think we're asking the wrong questions. And the other thing is we're worried about this quantum supremacy or quantum computing and this technology. I want you to know that the natural world and you and I are quantum mechanical beings. The reason we created quantum computing was because of the Green Revolution. And this just doesn't come from me, even though one of my first degrees is in computer science. And I love quantum, I love technology, I love AI and things like that. But the father of quantum string theory, he actually talks about this, and many others, Neil deGrasse Tyson and many others talk about it, that part of the Green Revolution having to do with agriculture and food and how we grow food and crops, we had this epiphany moment where we said, how in the hell does a plant capture carbon, do photosynthesis, create oxygen, heal the soils, and produce food, and about 1,000 other quantum mechanical processes at the same time? How does it do that? And so we thought, oh, we needed to create this quantum computer to figure out how this natural world is doing quantum mechanical things. Well, we're quantum mechanical beings, and we have been since our existence on this earth. But that life on Earth that really crawled out of that primordial soup for 3.8 billion years has always been a quantum mechanical thing. And so we need to realize AI for good, quantum for good. How do we use it as a tool to help us achieve the sustainable development goals, to achieve regenerative development goals, how to achieve resilient development goals, how to move the needle to do these things in a much more efficient process. Us as human beings have trouble when it gets into complexity or systems, but I want you to know we all have the ability to think in systems. We all have the ability to harness our innate nature to as quantum mechanical beings to use that. And for example, the body has 11 systems in it: the nervous system, the digestive system, the skeletal system, 11 systems in our body. And not one of those systems controls the other 10. They all work in harmony, gooey together. But let's say you break a bone, or let's say you have a nervous system disorder. The other 10 try to compensate so that you're not disabled or die. They kind of try to help. But normally they all work in harmony, gooey together, but there's not one that controls some other. And the other thing is because they're so natural, they work autonomous. So we don't have to say, okay, today you need to breathe, and then you need to sleep, and you need to eat, and you need to do this and that. Most of them are autonomous, and they just work. And that's how systems work, especially if we don't use that reductionism I talked about earlier, where we say we reduce human beings down to the lowest common denominator. We use mechanization. We mechanize practices, put people in silos, boxes, and linear thinking. We're not linear beings. We're not supposed to be put in silos and boxes. We're supposed to be able to do quantum leaps and do amazing things with the natural world together in harmony in this evolutionary process. And when we do that, that's when we have abundance. And so I believe right now we're at this cusp of the super cycle of technology: AI, quantum computing, biotechnologies, and many other advanced technologies all coming together at the same time to transform humanity from the current epoch of the Anthropocene that we're in into a new age or era or epoch. And I hope it's the Symbiocene that we transform into. I really believe that's where we need to go. And I want everybody to know on this who's listening to this podcast is never before in human history have we transformed from one age or epoch to another without innovation. And those innovations are what we call general purpose technologies. Wow, that sounds familiar to AI, GPT. Well, AI is a general purpose technology. So is quantum, so are biotechnologies. And never before have we transformed from one epoch to another or one era to another without innovation. The pneumatic tire, the steam engine, the printing press, the microprocessors, the computer, and on and on. Never before have we changed or improved or advanced as a civilization, as a world, without some form of innovation. So I don't think we need to be fearful of that innovation. I think we need to say, how can we use it as good? It's a tool. It's a new advanced tool that we can use to get into a new epoch or era or age. And there's one more book here I'll show you. And I'll put my face around it. It's called Symbiosis as a Source of Evolutionary Innovation. And I just got done talking about the super cycle of innovation, but I want everybody to know, and I've used the word symbiosis, and I'm sorry if nobody knows what that means, but Lynn Margulis and a Russian scientist long time ago before Lynn came up with symbiogenesis and symbiosis. It's a process of how life on Earth evolved through a single-celled organism to a nucleated organism that eventually sprung up to life on Earth and how life on Earth started. It's called symbiosis, and it's a process of cooperation and collaboration. Lynn Margulis turned the scientific community on its head and said, the way our world has always worked is in symbiosis, in a regenerative process. We have understood the meaning, what Darwin meant with natural selection, with the misunderstanding of natural selection that it's only the strong survive, survival of the fittest, severe competition. That's not how the world has ever worked. The way that the world has always worked is in symbiosis. And this book specifically is a group of about 200 scientists that met at Lake Como for a symposium over an amount of time. And they wrote it right on the cover of the book. It says symbiosis as an evolutionary form of a source of evolutionary innovation. Symbiosis is the fastest form of human evolutionary innovation that our world has ever seen. It's beyond a super exponential. It goes into quantum tunneling, and it's how the world has always worked. And I'm telling you, we're at this cusp of super cycle of technology, but us as humans and the natural world has this ability to make evolutionary quantum leaps to do amazing, great things because we're part of that process that brought us here to life on Earth. And in all living systems, in biology, ecology, in all living subsystems, 1 plus 1 never equals 2. 1 plus 1 is always a super exponential and verges on quantum tunneling. And that's what this book talks about, and many others that really talk about that process of how life on Earth works. And that's why I said regeneration is an abundant model. And so I know it gets complex, but whenever you talk about AI, quantum, and those technologies, you have to say, are we asking the right questions? And is it really in the technology, or are we really quantum mechanical beings, and do we have that innovation that's actually way faster and better than anything we've seen before? And when we combine that, boy, we can make a quantum leap to the next era and epoch.
Well, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I'm learning a lot with you. And how can we reach that symbiosis? And we have seen a lot of uncertainty, polycrisis, lack of commitment from politicians. What is your opinion? How can we do that? Because symbiosis also means cooperation between different organisms.
Absolutely. So that's the big question. That's the golden question. You gave the answer in the question. It's really what symbiosis, breaking it down to the simplest form, means cooperation and collaboration. It means for everyone. What does a world that works for everyone? It's one that really works for everyone, that we're all cooperating and collaborating. Because if one person on this earth suffers, we all suffer. It's not there. Our world doesn't work where there's only even though it seems this way, that there's only a few at the top and the rest of us are really struggling at the bottom. And then there's a kind of a mid fringe. But if we have that symbiosis, that symbiotic Earth, and realize we're all on spaceship Earth, like Buckminster Fuller said, that life goes better. That's where, when I said 1 plus 1 doesn't ever equal 2, it equals a super exponential. Whenever we've seen those cooperations and collaborations breaking down walls, borders, and those things, we've seen unbelievable growth and expansiveness and success and transformations to a better world. And that's why when you originally asked me, can we achieve the sustainable development goals? The way we're currently doing it, I'd say no. But if we come together and collaborate, we understand what it means and who it's for. It's for all of us. That it doesn't mean that some have and some don't have. It's for all of us. That we can do it in a short amount of time because we have that technology and the ability to do that. But if we don't, we absolutely won't. And let me give you another example. I love examples. So I'm an ecological economist. I'm also a systems scientist. I also, studied computer science, and I'm Germany's largest organic farmer. So I've done a bunch of different things, but I really like education. I like to study. I like to make sense of how things go. So there was this great study called the Handy Study. It was done by NASA and Science magazine. It was done twice over four or 5 year period twice, once in 2014 and once in 2018. NASA said, we want to find out how many civilization frameworks there have been in our world before. How many civilizations have been in our world before? Why did they collapse? What model were they running when they collapsed? What was the reason they collapsed? And anything else we can find out about those civilizations. So the first study went out and looked and says, well, there's about 72 different civilization frameworks we can find, all these different branches. But out of all those branches, we say core 32 civilization frameworks. And what that means is early antiquity, Mesopotamia, Incas, Aztecs, Mayas, Greeks, Romans, on, 32 core civilization frameworks in our world. And all but 5 of those civilizations collapsed because of ecological or environmental collapse. So basic resources, food, water, sanitation, just the basics of that civilization is why they collapsed. And those other 5 that collapsed because of disease, disruption, or displacement. There was some kind of a disease, they were forced to move, or there was that displacement, or some kind of disruption, natural catastrophe, or something that wiped that civilization out. At that time, they were pretty small. But all 32 of those civilizations, they found out were running the exact same civilization framework model. And that model is a hierarchy model. So it's like a pyramid. It's the hierarchy model where there's one king, ruler, empress, priest at the top. And then on the bottom of that layer are peasants, slaves, laborers, and farmers. Peasants, slaves, laborers, and farmers at the bottom, holding up the entire framework, right? And that was interesting because that's the same model we're running today. But what was really interesting is that they found out that none of those 32 civilization frameworks, the people at the bottom, the peasants, slaves, laborers, and farmers, were indigenous. That means that they were all taken from another country, another culture, another place, brought in as slaves, peasants, slaves, laborers, and farmers to build up that civilization framework for Egyptians, Romans, early antiquity, Mesopotamia, Incas, Aztecs, Maya. They were all taken from somewhere else to build that up. And there's, speculation, thought, whatever you want to call it, they're saying that the reason is not only they collapsed because they were running that model, but because those peasants, slaves, laborers, and farmers did not have buy-in. They weren't indigenous to that civilization they were building for others, for the person at the top. They didn't have ownership. They knew that they would never get to live in those places after it was built up, or that they would never have ownership. They would never get to bring their family that maybe they were taken away from, or that they would have to leave after it was built up. That they didn't have buy-in to that civilization framework model. And it's a very hierarchy model. And so they believe through that process, and maybe things that those peasants, slaves, laborers, and farmers did, that also led to the collapse. That structure led to a collapse because that model wasn't one of cooperation and collaboration and equality, where everybody had that ownership. If you build your own house, if you start your own farm, if you do your own business, if you decorate your own house, you have the buy-in, and you like to show it off to people, and you're proud of it because you took a hand in the process of that, where these other people were forced through that. And we see today around the world, we're still running a hierarchy model, and we see it in the Middle East and Africa. We see it in China, where a lot of people go. Let's take, for example, Dubai or Qatar or Abu Dhabi. They go there to build up these civilizations in the desert, and the majority of the workers are from Pakistan and from Asia and from different places. We don't call them peasants, slaves, laborers, and farmers. We call them hospitality workers, taxi drivers, construction workers, farmers, they have a different connotation, but they live in worker camps. If you ask any of them, say, hey, can you afford to live in one of these luxury places that you're buying? Let's say it's in Saudi Arabia, the Neom. You say, can you afford to live in the line, this Neom in Saudi Arabia that you're building up? They're like, there's no way that I could live there. That's so expensive. And I live in a workers camp and I send my money home to someone else. Um, and they don't have that buy-in. But that same model, whether it's the Western world, whether it's Europe, and most of our organizations are run that way. We don't have people that have buy-in or ownership where they work and what they do. They're just doing it for a wage and a job. And it's not slavery positions, but it's not for us. We don't feel fully, and that's why that's 86% job dissatisfaction around the world, which ties to that work-life balance. And the model that does work is this regenerative. It's more of a circular regenerative model where everybody has a buy-in, everybody has a part, everybody can have the ownership, everybody gets paid a fair wage, everybody has those basic things covered, and they're like Apple followers. They're like um, Patagonia followers. They're like, I love my company. I love to work here. I get discount on clothes. I can buy this. It's such a cool. I get these products, and they have the buy-in, and they're like a cult following because they feel like they're part of it. They have a little bit of ownership in that, and that's the model we need to shift to go in that direction so that we build up this. And that model is done through regenerative models, living models, and these cooperation and collaborative models. And there's a lot of learning lessons that we can do that. But guess what? When I learned about this big history and those things in school, I was like, why am I learning about the pioneers that did the hand carts across America? Why am I learning about the Egyptians and the Romans and that? And then I would go to those places. I take a selfie by the Parthenon. I take a selfie by the Colosseum, or go to Machu Picchu and take these photos of me there. But did I really know what happened or what those stories were telling me and why those civilizations collapsed? And that we're just repeating the same thing today? Am I learning from that history that I learned in school? Or do I maybe need some more knowledge, something, a tool like AI or quantum to provide me with a new form of education so that I can really understand why I'm learning about history, why I want to know why those civilizations collapsed? And right now, we need to flip the switch. Instead of taking a selfie at one of these civilizations that have collapsed, like in Rome at the Colosseums or whatever. We should say, why don't we not celebrate and post on social media about civilizations that have collapsed? Why don't we think about how we can evolve and not preserve collapsed civilizations, but preserve the future of humanity to keep going and keep regenerating and restoring and evolving to a better future? Why are we holding importance to buildings that have collapsed and civilizations and governance and structures that don't work and have never worked, and they just keep repeating the same thing? The definition of insanity is going back over and repeating the same thing over and over again. We need to shift the new models. If we want to build a new world, we need to not use the same thinking that we used when we created those models that don't work. We need to come up with new models and new ways that make those old ones obsolete.
Well, I'm amazed by your knowledge, and it's been really great to hear you. I was thinking about if people, as you said before, would see Earth as their home, we wouldn't have this disconnection when people are working in other places, because they will feel that they belong to Earth and here or anywhere. Because in Portugal, it's the same. Because in construction, we also have people from Pakistan, from India. It's a lot of immigrants, and they are not emotionally connected. That's a lot of difficulties. And you mentioned really important things like dialogue, this regenerative development based in dialogue and co-creation. Those are really important things. And well, it's been a long conversation, but really interesting. And I would like to have your opinion. You are an American living in Europe, right? And how do you see the past developments in terms of politics, and how do you see the future? Both, well, the position of United States and also Europe, because we are here. We have been allies, but we need a stronger position regarding this transformation, regarding the path of regeneration.
I appreciate you asking that. So I am a global citizen. My mother was German. My dad's American. My family on my mother's side were German and Austrian, and from Spain, and from northern Italy, and from Japan, believe it or not. And on my dad's side, they were from English Irish that then had went into the East Hampton, New York, and Boston area and kind of settled there. And I have both passports, but I consider myself a global citizen, and that I'm a crew member of this spaceship Earth. And I think as long as we see this division and separation and borders and us against them, or luxury, or this class model, the hierarchy model is one of classes. It's the top class, the middle class, the low class, and it's one of division, and that's also why it doesn't work. And um, I think that's why we need to come back into this. There's this old Sanskrit word that I talk about a lot. It's called seva. Seva is an old Sanskrit word that means regeneration, selfless service to life. And I'm here as a global citizen to have selfless service to life. And the way I apply that regeneration is I don't expect to be, whether it's here in Hamburg, Germany, or in the US, or in Asia, where I go quite a bit, to go there and have everything handed to me on a silver platter. Um, People ask me all the time, say, "Hey, Mark, you travel a lot, you speak a lot all over the world. Where's your favorite place? Where should we go live? Where's the best, most sustainable place and stuff?" And my home is with me, and it's a process of daily regeneration. I've been doing this for 33 years now, and every day is a process of regeneration, revitalization, so that I have the energy and the excitement. I've probably told what I've said to you 100 times before, but do you feel like it was the first time you heard it? Do you feel like it was when I talked about it? I didn't say, "Oh, let me tell you this boring old story." Every time it lives for me, because it does live for me. And it's a regenerative process. It gives me energy, it gives me excitement, because I know that's how the world works. And I know it's a process and a model for a civilization framework, but for success, and how we can have really beautiful, abundant living and life on earth. And so every day in that process, I regenerate myself. But most people say, "Okay, where's the best place or the utopian place on earth?" Well, first of all, I've traveled a lot. There is no place. There's no place that's perfect. Every place has their problems. But the thing with regeneration is, no matter where you can go, no matter how bad it is, you have that regenerative home in you, and you can regenerate any place you go to. So just even if it's like a home in Hamburg, and you're there and you say, "Boy, I don't like the walls and the carpets," or "I don't like the building has no renewable energy and it's still using oil and gas and all these things," well, you can regenerate that. You can renew, restore, renovate. You can do that. You can hook yourself to a renewable grid. You can change those things and regenerate the place you're in. You can plant more greens and plant more perennials and trees and create better oxygen. You can restore and make that place better. And I think the biggest problem we have now around the world is we think that we can buy insurance or we can buy sustainability or regeneration. And it takes all of us, all 8+ billion people, to regenerate the earth and make it better than we found it. And that's a process that we should all be actively involved in. It's a better model for health for our bodies. It's a better model for our success and abundance, because if you do that, you're creating more economic models. You can employ more people, you can help more people, you can create more energy and better soils and better air quality, than just saying, oh, I'm just coming here to use this and I don't have ownership, or I pay taxes so that somebody else does that, so that Humberg does all that work for me and I just pay him taxes so that they do it. I pay them taxes and they don't do any of that. They're not doing anything, They're not, the infrastructure here is good and it's modern, but it's nowhere where it should be. It's still stuck in the industrial revolution. And I think that's why instead of saying, where's the perfect place and we'll just go move in and then use it. No, you have to be part of that regenerative process. And it's not hard. It's a very fun and abundant and beautiful thing. And it actually keeps you healthy and vital and full of energy and fed well. And that's what keeps you going. Whereas if you don't and you live in a concrete jungle and you're not doing those practices, that's when you get the burnout, depression, schizophrenia, bipolarness. That's when you're like, oh, I'm so unhealthy. I'm so tired of depression. That's because our human health is a microcosmos of the earth around us. And if the earth around us is not living, it's dead, it's a desert, it's desertified, there's conflict or fighting, then that's going to come back and eventually bug us and create problems with us.
Yeah, so first is a shift in our mindset to a more regenerative mode. Do you have a final message for our listeners?
I do. I want to empower all 8+ billion global citizens to live an adaptive lifestyle of health and sustainability within the safe operating spaces of our planetary boundaries. And I do this by creating the conditions that are conducive to life to thrive and flourish amid ever changing life conditions. And I invite you to be part of this regenerative journey as well. If you want to get the wisdoms that I've talked about here on this podcast, please come by my podcast called Inside Ideas with Marc Buckley. It's on all podcast formats and on video on YouTube and Spotify video. And you can hear the conversations I have with authors who've written books about regeneration and about regenerative agriculture and regenerative economies. You can start to get that knowledge that wasn't taught in school, so that you can make the shift in your life. And the last big final message is I would implore you to find your why and your purpose for existing and your answer to what does a world that works for everyone look like for you, because I know it will have a powerful force in your life to live a beautiful, abundant, regenerative life. It'll give you the tools that you need, because if you have that, if you have your why, your purpose for existing, and the answer to that question, but you're working for a company that's or organization that's destructive or going in a different direction, you're always going to be at an imbalance. You're always going to have this thing that I talked about with the work-life balance. You're always going to feel like something's wrong, or you're struggling, or you're depressed, or you're not satisfied with how things are going, because there's this imbalance in the direction that you want to go. And it's the same way with a spouse or partner. If you're with someone who does something totally different at you and you're not aligned on that same mission forward, you need to reevaluate. You need to be around people that feel the same and cooperate and collaborate so that we can make that shift moving forward, or change that paradigm to help them to see of where you want to go. And that will give you true success, fulfillment, energy, and all the strength you need to have the tools to make it through this polycrisis world that we're in right now. And the future is absolutely bright, and I know we can do it, but I'd love to give you the tools and show you the books or help you any way I can. You can find tons of stuff online, where to look and that. Everybody starts at a different level. And I just want to, hopefully, I've said something here today that has touched you, that will spark an idea for you to go out and get more information and learn more until you can make that transition or that journey to a better future for yourself, if you're not in that situation already.
Thank you so much. It was a really insightful conversation and with a lot of food for thought. And well, once again, it was a pleasure to have you. And I really appreciate you taking your time to be with us. And I hope to invite you in a future episode to continue this conversation and go deeper into specific subjects.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.